Some of it's ego, but also some of it is marketing. These earnings calls are a marketing event as much as it is updating us as investors about what's going on. Important point to keep in mind here.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chipstock Investor. About a month ago, we released our cybersecurity industry manual, which if you haven't watched that video yet, make sure you go and check it out either before or after you watch this video. And you can check out our manual link in the description below. Today, we're going to be talking about Zscaler. Is Zscaler still a top cybersecurity stock for 2024? Now, like many of its cybersecurity peers, Zscaler has gotten a bit volatile after a big rally. After that huge one-year growth, shares of Zscaler have hit some bumps in the road, as you can see from the chart. That's not to say that the cloud-native cybersecurity leader is performing poorly, however. Actually, Zscaler is doing very well, although its growth does continue to moderate. So today we're going to be talking about Zscaler's competitors and whether or not this company is still a top buy in 2024.
Quick recap here of the state of the cybersecurity industry. Massive need, huge demand coming, especially from the enterprise market. Couple of quick stats here that help illustrate this. This is from Comparitech, 88.5 million estimated victims of cybercrime each year. And then especially on the enterprise side, Cybercrime Magazine estimated at $10.5 trillion. That'll be the impact on the global economy by 2025, nearly 10% of global GDP. That's a mind-boggling number. But when you factor in all the things that cybercrime can impact, not just having the data stolen, but also the impact to worker productivity, for example, the numbers start to add up pretty quick as far as the massive cost getting hit with an event. And so, of course, this bubble chart that Kasey made last year, illustrating some of the big growth trends in the market. We're going to specifically today be talking about cloud security, which is now estimated to be well north of $60 billion and one of the highest growth parts of that giant, roughly $220 billion global industry. Cloud expected to be one of the higher growth aspects of that over the next 5 to 7 years.
Taking a look at where Zscaler fits into our cybersecurity industry flowchart, you can see at the bottom, public data centers, cloud, and small regional public data centers and cell towers. That's the primary places that Zscaler provides cybersecurity to, the cloud infrastructure. Zscaler has a number of competitors. You can see that the cloud security platforms are the big ones that you think of: Cisco, Arista, Fortinet, Checkpoint, Palo Alto Networks, and F5. But Zscaler is specifically a cloud security software. And the smaller competitors there, Darktrace and Varonis, also play in this cloud security software space.
And Kasey, that slide that we just showed, those are just the publicly traded stocks that play in cloud security. Let's peel back the layers a little bit more and explain what Zscaler does exactly, because there are also privately owned competitors in this space as well. Lots of startups always popping up in cybersecurity because it's such a high growth market. So there on the left is what's known as secure service edge. At least that's the term that Gartner first coined for this. And then on the right, SASE. That is indeed how it's pronounced, SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. And Palo Alto Networks, far and away the leader in this market on the right, but you will not see Zscaler in the magic quadrant on the right, only the one on the left, where it competes very fiercely with Palo Alto Networks and a privately owned company called Netskope that actually Gartner has marked as a leader ahead of Zscaler and Palo Alto Networks. That one gets very little attention, though, again, because it's privately held, not a stock that can be purchased. And so you mentioned in the cybersecurity industry flow, Zscaler is a cloud software security provider. And so if you think about what SSE, Secure Service Edge, is exactly, you can think of it as a type of subset of SASE, the market that Palo Alto Networks is the leader in. So SASE kind of encompasses everything from network security to cloud and converges all of it into one type of service. Secure Service Edge only focuses on the cloud software portion of that. So things like secure web gateway, zero trust network access, cloud access, firewalls as a service, which is just a simple way of saying a software based firewall versus a traditionally hardware based firewall. Zscaler provides all of that stuff, but not the network security like Palo Alto Networks also adds on to these cloud-based security offerings. So in that cybersecurity industry breakdown that we did, Kasey, you talked about Zscaler as a type of alternative route that a company can take to make sure that its data stays secure. So rather than just sending very sensitive data and access to data and apps via a public network, you can make use of Zscaler's zero trust exchange. And now we're delving into nitty gritty technological things that you may or may not be here to learn about. But on the left, you can think of traditional network security going through a firewall or a VPN, where you are running all of your user access via that hardware, which opens up potentially the possibility for more places to have that data stolen or tampered with by those who shouldn't have authority to do so. Versus on the right, if you run everything through Zscaler's infrastructure, you sort of bypass all of that traditional network, and a user is directly accessing the cloud-based app or data through the Zscaler zero trust exchange. So it, in effect, decreases, or theoretically anyways, decreases the number of points that data can be accessed by those who aren't supposed to be.
This map that Zscaler provides shows their points of presence throughout the world, data centers that they have their cybersecurity hardware and software available. We talked about the importance of this in both of our last videos regarding Fortinet and Palo Alto Networks, and the same is true of Zscaler. When it comes to cybersecurity, you don't want your data traveling more distance than it has to. That's why having all of these regional points of presence is very important for Zscaler. The data does not have to travel as far, which reduces the risk of a cybersecurity breach. We're looking at this cybersecurity industry flowchart again because it's very important to understand just how many competitors are in this space. It's a big space. And so Zscaler has frequent run-ins, I guess we could say, with other cybersecurity company, even in words. There was a few questions regarding this on the last earnings call with CEO Jay Chaudhry. Speaking about Palo Alto Networks, he was asked specifically about a competitor saying that they are having customer fatigue. And to combat that, their marketing strategy is to give away some of their products for free and asking if that has an impact on Zscaler. Now, we know that this company is Palo Alto Networks. We covered that in a recent video as well, and its new marketing strategy. But Jay Chaudhry had some interesting things to say.
Yeah, and to be clear, some controversial things, especially if you're an investor that maybe doesn't completely have your mind wrapped around how all of this stuff works yet. So Chaudhry was basically saying Zscaler itself is not seeing customer fatigue. Now, we'll talk about this a bit more later when we talk about Zscaler's decelerating growth. But it does seem there is still plenty of demand for the company. But in leading up to this competitive marketplace discussion, Chaudhry said this in the last Q&A session at the end of February. And he said, just like the role of the data center diminished and public cloud took off, similarly, the role of firewalls, again, that's a hardware-based device, controls cybersecurity in the past. Like maybe you had an office building with workers in it, and you just used a firewall to keep data going into and out of that physical location secure. Zero trust security is now growing. And that makes sense because workers are mobile now. They're logging in and accessing apps and data from anywhere. And so that's really kind of blown up the traditional model. But here's where things get a little bit dicey though, because he says, this is bound to impact sales of firewall vendors. And this naturally puts the legacy vendors in a defensive position. And they're trying to give away products as bundles, which end up becoming shelfware, which basically means a product that's purchased but never actually used. And this strategy starts to unravel over time. We'll stick to our strategy. Now, this is an off-the-cuff remark, and so we can't expect all of the terminology used to be completely accurate, but just to clarify some things, the role of the data center is not diminished. The cloud is data centers. They're public data centers. What Chaudhry is saying here is that private data centers that a company uses via its own private network have started to become diminished in recent years. That's only partially true. The global IT industry is still very much mostly traditional networking, traditional on premises computing, and private networks, not the public cloud. And now you could make the argument with the advent of generative AI, on premises computing and private networks are actually making a resurgence. So I wouldn't write off networking security as dead, and Zscaler is going to be the only growth business going forward. What is actually happening is we have a fragmentation of this market in recent years, which was perpetuated by the cloud. And you now have all of these different types of security segments. We'll show you just this one from CrowdStrike, again, showing how many startups are out there, how many competitors there are in each different specific cybersecurity service. When you talk about endpoint, of course, you have CrowdStrike, but lots of other companies there. And then in cloud, CrowdStrike competing in cloud security, just like Zscaler is. Now, they don't have Zscaler listed here. They have Prisma, which is Palo Alto Networks cloud platform. But the point is, all of these big companies, we'll call them maybe the big four: Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet, CrowdStrike, and Zscaler. They're all taking some sort of platform approach these days where they're slowly extending out the number of services they have to try to consolidate the market to themselves. All of the parts of an IT system continue to work together. Nothing is being destroyed. Traditional data centers and IT is not being destroyed. There's just new parts of the IT ecosystem coming up. And so that provides opportunity for Zscaler. So I think we'll just repeat maybe what we said in the previous video. A lot of these guys get on these earnings calls and they spar with each other in words. Some of it's ego, but also some of it is marketing. These earnings calls are a marketing event as much as it is updating us as investors about what's going on. Important point to keep in mind here.
If you want to take a look at that video where we covered this new strategy by Palo Alto Networks, we'll make sure we leave that in the description and up here on a card as well. So ultimately, Nick, we feel like Zscaler and a company like Palo Alto Networks and all the others can coexist and thrive because these companies are servicing different customer needs.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So let's talk about some of the numbers for Zscaler over the last couple of years.
Yeah, we actually owned Zscaler up until late 2019, I believe it was, and had some concerns with valuation, which turned out to be only partially valid. One thing you can see here, the company was actually decelerating in 2019, had a big reacceleration in growth during the pandemic when everything was kind of force shoved into the cloud. And now that cycle of deceleration starting all over again. You can see the implied guidance for Q3 fiscal 2024, basically spring of calendar year 2024. And then the end of the fiscal year, which ends later this summer, 2024, you can see full year guidance, full year outlook for about 31% growth, a significant slowdown from the 40% plus growth the company was reporting just a couple of quarters ago. And so, Kasey, just jumping back to the stock chart again, that's part of what's happening here with the volatility story in the stock price rearing its ugly head again. Fantastic rally from the lows of the bear market, but the stock selling off pretty hard again because of the outlook implying, once again, a deceleration in growth, and Zscaler still not profitable on a GAAP basis, though it is, of course, profitable on a free cash flow basis. Here you can see our valuation based on a free cash flow basis and expected free cash flow growth over the course of the next 2 years.
On a price to free cash flow basis, you can see Zscaler at 57 times price to free cash flow, Palo Alto Networks 34, Fortinet 31 times, and CrowdStrike a whopping 84 times price to free cash flow. So now take a look at those two columns on the right, expected free cash flow growth percentage for 2024 and 2025. Both Zscaler and CrowdStrike have higher expected free cash flow growth, which then translates over to those higher multiples in the price to free cash flow metric. So at this point, it looks like Zscaler is the better buy at only 57 times price to free cash flow. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, you know that CrowdStrike is actually GAAP profitable, which Zscaler is not. And that's due to that stock-based compensation that they have been performing pretty heavily over the course of the last few years.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet, the old networking giants, which have also gotten into the cloud market as well, still very much in growth mode. That's why they're still not cheap stocks. The market expects them to be high growth and highly profitable businesses for a long time to come. So those are the two relative value stocks compared to Zscaler and CrowdStrike overall. And also both of them are GAAP net profitable. So actually of these four, Zscaler is the only one that isn't GAAP profitable. And a lot of that stock-based compensation going to the CEO and co-founder, Jay Chaudhry. Collectively, he and his family and other controlling interests own about a third of Zscaler stock. So very much his business, one of the wealthiest people on the planet because he owns so much of Zscaler and it's become such a big business. So something to be aware of, though, when you're considering a Zscaler stock. Yes, it looks like the relative value from a high growth business point of view, but don't expect that stock-based compensation paid out to Chaudhry to stop anytime soon.
So our final takeaway here on Zscaler, it cannot be ignored as a top cybersecurity player. But given that high price and high volatility of the stock, investors should definitely consider a dollar cost averaging plan on this one to build a position over time, in our point of view.
Yeah, and we already have full positions in the other three out of the big four. We've owned Fortinet for many years, Palo Alto Networks for a number of years. CrowdStrike, we originally started purchasing, again, via a dollar cost average plan, not long after their IPO a few years ago. So for us personally, Zscaler doesn't do much to diversify our portfolio. We already have ample cybersecurity stocks that are doing more than fine. So if you are looking at Zscaler, consider all the puts and takes with this one. Yes, one of the highest growth, if not the highest growth business of the biggest cybersecurity pure play stocks. A lot of work for them to do still on the profitability front as they try to grow up, try to mature the business to get more in line with the business model that the bigger players have, like Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet have.
All right, that's a wrap on our take on Zscaler. Make sure you have hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Check out our cybersecurity industry manual in our description. You can purchase that over on our Ko-fi shop, or if you are more of a subscription type of person, you can check our membership here on YouTube or over on our Ko-fi page. That will get you access to our Discord channel as well as all of our published manuals like the cybersecurity manual. And stay tuned for another video coming up later this week on wafer fab equipment and advanced packaging. We'll have that manual and video out later this week. So stay tuned. We'll see you again soon at Chipstock Investor.